I respect people who don't sit still and develop all the time. It's really good. But this can also play into the bad side, when a person in pursuit of personal achievements can lose the most valuable thing, himself. My wife is a careerist, but her love of work ruined her, and now she regrets her terrible act. While I was watching the breaking news on TV, my wife arrived home late from work. "Boyd, you won't believe who hired me to represent them today," she exclaimed. "David Bridges," I replied. "How did you know?" "You're on the news." I gestured towards the television hanging on the wall. She glanced at the TV, and there she was. Though it was an older picture, likely taken from the firm's website, it was her. She had joined David Bridges' team of lawyers. It didn't come as a surprise. Before I insisted she stop working 100-hour weeks, she had been one of the finest celebrity defense attorneys in the nation. I wasn't some primitive jerk who opposed his wife's career. I simply wanted to spend more than a fleeting moment with her each month. 2 years have passed since then. She was representing a senator who was accused of murdering one of his staffers. I could sense his guilt, and I doubted she was entirely convinced of his innocence either. Nevertheless, she tirelessly examined every piece of evidence, searching for even the smallest hint to use in his defense. In the end, she managed to secure a hung jury for the defendant. The decision not to retry him by the district attorney surprised the nation. It was during the trial, on the 3rd consecutive day of her sleeping in her office, that I served her with divorce papers. Eventually, she asked me what she could do to salvage our relationship. I suggested she quit her job. Despite being in our late 30s, we were financially comfortable, with more money than we could ever spend. While some of our wealth came from her clients, I also had a successful career as a radio talk show host. My syndicated political talk show ranked in the top 10 nationwide and was #1 in several markets. She agreed to reduce her workload to a consulting role and also committed to starting a family with me. While she listened to the pundits discuss her client and the possibility of aiding his exoneration, I cradled our son, Mikey. The phrase "get him off" unsettled me. It carried connotations that felt uncomfortably suggestive. I never suspected her of infidelity. She valued her reputation too highly to engage in extramarital affairs, avoiding any actions that might tarnish her image. My concern wasn't her fidelity, but rather her relentless dedication to her work. Noticeably absent from my thoughts was the belief that her love for me would prevent her from cheating. I was certain she cared for me, but her true passion lay in her career. Her venture into consulting made her a sought-after expert on TV talk shows, where she provided legal analysis. At times, she appeared on television daily, reveling in the attention. "Are you upset?" she inquired during commercial breaks. "What do you think?" I grumbled. "Mikey needs changing." Taking our son to his room, I left her uncertain how to respond, which suited me fine. I enjoyed keeping her off balance. She thrived on control, and I relished disrupting her routine. She trailed after me, attempting to reassure. "It won't be like before. I'm just a member of the team, not the leader." I replied noncommittally, focused on attending to Mikey. "There you go, little man, all clean and dry." Mikey giggled as I tickled him, bringing a smile to my face. I blew a raspberry on his pudgy belly, eliciting even more laughter from him. "Boyd, it's just a tax evasion case. They simply need my assistance in selecting the jury." "Of course," I replied as I walked past her and returned to the family room. "You're overreacting," she contended. "No, I don't think so," I retorted in a childish manner. "This could be a significant opportunity for us. Just the name recognition alone will—" "Not us," I interrupted after placing Mikey in his playpen. "What?" "Not us, Alicia. This is good for you. But I have a feeling it will spell the end for us," she shouted. "That's nonsense." I shook my head and grabbed my keys from the credenza. "Your dinner is in the oven, staying warm. I'm going to the lounge." David Bridges, our former state governor, faced a barrage of criticism upon announcing his candidacy for the upcoming presidential election. Allegations surfaced, accusing him of failing to disclose millions of dollars purportedly received from a foreign company for undisclosed reasons on his tax returns. Additionally, he was indicted on charges of election interference stemming from his previous gubernatorial campaign. The prospect of his trial intrigued me, though I harbored reservations about my wife returning to legal practice. In the solitude of a refined cigar lounge near my studio, I indulged in a Davidoff Churchill. While fellow patrons acknowledged me, our interactions remained brief, unless explicitly invited otherwise. Despite my celebrity status, my presence as a regular visitor soon became mundane. "Boyd, help yourself to some of my scotch," a familiar face offered, though his name eluded me. "Thanks," I replied, pouring a generous glass from his decanter. "I saw the news. Thought you might need a stiff drink," he remarked. "You're not wrong," I conceded, raising an imaginary toast before retreating to the quietest corner of the room. I drew in a deep breath, taking a long drag from my cigarette before exhaling slowly. For a moment, I questioned whether my reaction had been excessive, but ultimately, I reaffirmed my conviction. I initiated divorce proceedings because of her relentless work schedule during significant cases. Only after she promised to quit did I consider reconciliation. I harbored no guilt for setting that condition. She had enjoyed a decade of professional success at the highest echelons, and I desired to start a family while we still could. Yet, when she embarked on another major trial without consulting me, it felt like a betrayal I hadn't anticipated. Perhaps I would have consented if she had sought my opinion, though it's doubtful. Regardless, I yearned to be part of the decision-making process. My attention shifted to the television across the room. There she was, Alicia, beaming on the screen once more. I recognized the painting behind her and realized she was in our living room. I hoped Mikey would begin to cry. She devoured those hosts, skillfully guiding them to believe she had addressed their inquiries without actually giving them what they sought. It was a display of mastery. Then, one of the hosts, who happened to be a golfing companion of mine, posed the question, "Will your husband be refiling the divorce paperwork?" "Excuse me?" Alicia exclaimed, taken aback. "Well, as part of your husband dropping the divorce proceedings against you, one condition was that you refrain from taking on any more trial clients. This appears to be a breach of your agreement." I quickly sent him a text. "I owe you a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle for that unexpected question. I can assure you that my husband fully supports my career decisions." She was visibly flustered, and I relished it. "No, he doesn't," I interjected aloud, eliciting laughter from those who knew Alicia was my wife. Moments later, my phone buzzed. "Boyd, it's Dana Collins from the Times. Mind if I ask you a few questions about your wife's recent actions?" "Hey, Dana, it's been too long. We should catch up over lunch sometime, maybe even have you back on the show." "Sounds good. But how about those questions?" "Actually, I'd prefer to provide a statement." "Sure." I was caught off guard, completely blindsided. That might just be the headline for my article. Anything else you'd like to share? Maybe some context? "Well, as of now, she hasn't revisited those old issues. We're still happily together." "Thanks, Boyd. We'll chat soon." Dana was an attractive rising star in the news industry. I'd featured her on my show a few times as a favor to her boss. We had a mutually beneficial arrangement. My phone rang again and I silenced it. I knew I wouldn't find any peace otherwise. The media sharks were circling, especially considering I was one of their own. Bloody cannibals. When I entered our bedroom later that night, Alicia stated, "It won't be the same as before." She looked stunning in a floor-length black satin nightgown. The slit on the left side ended at mid-thigh, and its lace cups barely concealed her pink areola. Clearly, it wasn't intended for sleeping. "It doesn't matter whether it's the same or not," I replied, trying to avert my gaze. "You know what's at stake. It's different now. We have Mikey." I chuckled. "If you believe that having a son will deter me from wanting a wife who prioritizes her career, you're mistaken. If you revert to your old habits, you're out. Sweetheart, we're taking this too far. I don't want to argue. Alicia, the time to discuss this was before you accepted the job. Now we're dealing with the consequences." We'll be okay, you'll see. Now come to bed. I want to show you how much I love you. When she read my comments in the Times the next day, I anticipated her anger. I decided to make the most of the fact that I have an attractive wife, while it is still possible. We hugged tightly, exchanged kisses before collapsing on the bed, and then made love. She managed to whisper, "I love you," before drifting off to sleep. I pondered how she would feel about me in the morning. "Damn it!" she yelled as I entered the kitchen the next morning, catching me off guard. "You caught me completely off guard," I interrupted her before she could continue. "I simply told the truth." "You didn't need to spill the beans like that," she shouted. I shrugged. "It's done now. This will be the talk of the day, Boyd." I chuckled. At least they'll be focusing on something other than your client for a change. Her client had dominated the news for weeks leading up to their indictment and every day since. I gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and decided to grab coffee and breakfast on my way to work to avoid any more confrontation. I wondered how long it would take for her to revert back to her 16-hour workdays. "We're not finished discussing this," she yelled after me. I knew she was right. Upon arriving at my studio, chaos greeted me. I had a young college student handling phones, a sound engineer, a tech expert, and a producer assisting me. Unlike some hosts, I preferred to do my own news research rather than relying on a team. "Good grief, Boyd. The phones are non-stop today." I handed her a coffee and suggested, "Turn off the ringer, Missy. Let them go to voicemail and you can filter out the important calls for me." "Thanks, boss. That'll make things easier." I entered my office to find my producer already there. "Morning treating you well, Boyd?" Rose inquired. "Just fine, Rosie. What's the plan for today?" "The Bridges story is hard to dodge, especially now that you're dragged into it." "I'm not dragged in, my wife is. Same difference. Let's get Dana Cullins on the show. We'll discuss it, and I'll follow her lead into commentary. But make it clear, it's not an interview. I saw her piece this morning. Seems like she's got some personal vendetta against your wife." I chuckled. "Nah, she's got a soft spot for me. Overheard her gossiping once. I use it to my advantage. Don't string her along, Boyd. I thought this city would have chewed her up and spat her out by now." "Never underestimate a farmer's daughter. She's tough as nails." "All right, I'll reach out to her and set it up." "Thanks, Rose. And see if Dan Naranja can join too. Loved what he did to my wife on his show last night." "Having connections comes in handy, huh?" "You bet." "Okay, Boyd, you're on air in 5, 4, 3, 2. Rose gestured towards me as the on-air sign illuminated. "Good afternoon, listeners. I'm your charming host, Boyd Baxter, and with me in the studio today is Dana Collins from the Times. Hello, Dana." "Hi, Boyd. Delighted to be here, especially considering what's happening with your wife." She gave me a sly smile, and I shook my head. She was dressed in a short skirt, legs crossed, offering a glimpse of her stocking tops. I always appreciated a nice pair of legs, particularly when adorned in black nylon. "Yes, I anticipated you'd bring that up. Indeed, my wife has agreed to work with David Bridges' legal team as a jury consultant. She's no longer actively involved in courtroom representation." "A jury consultant?" Dana inquired. "Is that the story she's given you?" I shot her a glare. All she did was dangle her shoe off her enticing foot and flash a smile. "Seems like your wife left out a few details. My insiders at Bridges tell me she's the newest addition to their legal team, taking the lead at the defense table. I couldn't care less about what unnamed sources have to say. I never rely on them," I retorted with a shrug. She chuckled. "That's because you rely on stories from people like me to fuel your radio show." "Whoa!" I exclaimed, a hint of heat in my voice. "I'm no journalist, and I don't pretend to be. I simply host a show where I share my opinions on the day's events." She grinned and quipped, "And today's event is your wife coming out of retirement and deceiving you." "Let's take some calls," I interjected, attempting to steer the conversation away from dangerous territory. I was already losing control of it. Damn those legs. "Line 1, you're up," I said, trying to avoid glancing at Dana as she crossed her legs in the opposite direction. I didn't lie to you, I'm just a jury consultant. My wife's defensive voice came through the speakers. Well, if it isn't my dear wife, Alicia. Hi, sweetheart, I'll be home on time today. We're having pork roast for dinner. Dana chimed in. Hello, Mrs. Baxter. You know perfectly well my last name is Taylor, she retorted. When we got married, my wife chose not to add up to my surname. She had already established a professional reputation with her own name and decided to keep it. Understood, Dana replied. Mrs. Taylor. Regardless, Alicia interjected. Quit fabricating stories. My role on the legal team is solely to assist in jury selection. Got it, Dana responded. All right, ladies, let's leave it at that. Alicia, we'll discuss this further at home. But, moving on to the next caller. After that show, I exclaimed, that was a complete nightmare. Dana, slipping her shoes on, countered, I thought it went well. She had playfully removed them during the show to mess with me. Annoying. You owe me for that, I muttered. She chuckled. How about I treat you to dinner? Forget about your pork roast. The intensity in her gaze unsettled me. I knew she had a thing for me, but it felt like I was bait and she was a hungry shark. I'll pass, Dana. Maybe another time. I made a swift exit before I did something foolish, avoiding dinner with the striking redhead. Back home, I prepared the roast, coating it with oil, blending my seasonings, and massaging them onto the meat. 30 minutes later, I popped the pan into the oven. I served Mikey his evening meal and cracked open a beer. It was unbelievable, but I found myself grappling with the dilemma of whether to trust my wife or the undisclosed source Dana mentioned, and it was driving me crazy. A little more than 3 hours later, I had the table arranged, a delightful bottle of Chardonnay chilling in an ice bucket, and a perfectly cooked roast resting, ready to be carved. Alicia still hadn't returned home, but she was only 30 minutes late. As I nibbled on my salad, the minutes ticked by, and she was now an hour behind schedule. Yet there was no call or text from her. Deciding to keep the roast warm, I returned it to the oven and mixed myself a martini when she was an hour and a half late. Despite the temptation, I resisted the urge to contact her. I knew there would be an argument, and I was determined to come out on top. At the 2.5-hour mark, I turned off the oven and opted to dine out. The message arrived 3 minutes after my steak was served. Where are you? Setting the phone down, I sighed and indulged in another bite of the perfectly seared ribeye. There's an inexplicable joy in devouring a steak cooked at blazing temperatures. I was determined not to let her intrude upon that bliss. 5 minutes later, another text popped up. This time, just a question mark. I savored a mouthful of creamed spinach, reveling in its exquisite flavors. That evening's meal was a triumph. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a call. I sent it to voicemail, aware of her annoyance at being ignored. It felt like a silent victory in our unspoken battle. Wasn't I being mature? By the time my steak was gone, my wine glass empty, and the last traces of spinach scraped from the plate, I still hadn't responded to the third call. It was now 9:30. As I pulled into the garage at home, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I assumed she was angry and tried to match her mood with a scowl. "Where have you been and why are you ignoring me?" she yelled. I chuckled. "You already know. Did you even remember to take the roast out of the oven?" I entered the kitchen and spotted the roast resting in the pan atop the stove. "You didn't eat? Typical. What did you have at work? Pizza? Chinese?" "Chinese. Look, it won't always be like this. I don't care what you were doing. I care that you knew I was preparing dinner for us, and you didn't call to let me know you'd be working late. I'm sorry. You know how hectic it gets when—" She paused. I responded, "Yeah, I know how it gets. I filed for divorce over it, remember? You always forget you have a husband waiting at home. Except now there's a child at home too. Did you even realize Mikey isn't here? I assumed he was with you. Wait, where is he? Now you notice, huh? You're a lousy wife when you're on a case, and it turns out you're a lousy mother too." She slapped me. I rubbed my cheek and exited the kitchen. Boyd, wait, I'm sorry. I continued walking and left through the front door. She kept calling for me as I made my way across our lawn to my neighbor's house. She was looking after Mikey for me. He was sleeping peacefully in the playpen she had set up in her living room for her child, not stirring as I carried him back to my house. Alicia remained silent as she reached out her arms, silently asking for Mikey. It's unfair. You should have informed me he was next door. I could have spent some time with him while he was awake. Indeed, it's unfair. However, we also have the issue of you not informing me when you would be home. I was upset with you. You and that woman were disrespectful when I called into your show. Speaking of which, don't call my show like that. I dislike surprises, and we should always be on the same page. After all, we're supposed to be husband and wife. She lied, Boyd. I'm not the lead on the case. Only time will tell, won't it? I'm going to bed. Ever heard of James Anderson? Dana inquired the following afternoon. She intercepted me in the parking garage as I made my way to my car after the show. I felt like I was in a scene from All the President's Men. No, should I have? I responded. He's renowned as the top behavior analyst in the country. He's been involved in nearly every high-profile jury trial over the past 3 years. And my insider tells me David Bridges just recruited him as a jury consultant. So what's your wife's role in all of this? What's your angle here, Dana? Seriously, are you trying to sow discord between me and my wife? She shrugged and retorted, I'm just asking questions, Boyd. It's part of my job. Then find someone else to ask and keep that out of your damn story. I opened my car door, got in, and slammed it shut, unintentionally hitting my shoulder and letting out a yelp of pain. Real smooth. She chuckled and waved as I drove off, catching a glimpse of her shimmering nude stockings in my rearview mirror. At 6 o'clock, I served Mikey his dinner and prepared myself a sandwich using the leftover roast, which turned out quite tasty. Alicia once again arrived late without sending a text or making a call. An hour later, she entered through the garage door in a rush. I'm sorry, I got caught up and couldn't reach out. When exactly did you get caught up? I inquired. What do you mean? I mean, you weren't physically restrained, right? You could have sent me a text while in a meeting with other lawyers or reading a law book. Boyd, I apologized. Apologies aren't enough this time, Alicia. You need to spend time with your son before I put him to bed. Disappointed, I left the room and made my way to my basement man cave, expecting Alicia to follow with Mikey, but she didn't. I was looking forward to the confrontation, feeling stirred up by the situation. At halftime of the Thursday night football game, I stepped into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. However, my true intention was to discreetly observe my wife. I found her indulging in ice cream and engrossed in something on her tablet. Upon noticing my presence, she glanced up. We need to discuss this, Boyd, she said. There's nothing to discuss. You returned to work, yet you seem to have reverted to your old habits. Frankly, if you're not deceiving me, your focus should solely be on jury selection preparation. She averted her gaze, and for the first time, didn't refute the accusation of her deceit. I continued, Well, that's the end of it then. I refuse to play second fiddle to your job anymore. I'll revise the divorce papers and submit them again this week. Damn it, Boyd, we're not getting a divorce. I keep telling you, this time it's different. Sure. 2 days into your new job and you're already late and not calling in. Feels like déjà vu to me. It's just the beginning. Trust me, things will change. I have a lot of catching up to do for the case. Catching up on what? You're supposed to be advising them on jury selection. You don't get it, Boyd. There's a lot more involved than you think. Yeah? Whatever. I turned and walked away. She hurried in front of me, placing her hand on my chest. I promise, it won't be like before. Prove it. She pulled me into a hug, tears streaming down her face. Against my better judgment, I decided to give her another chance. It lasted 3 days. On a beautiful Sunday morning, I was engaged in a game of peekaboo with Mikey when she entered the room. "I need to head to the office for a few hours. I'll be back by noon." "What about our usual routine of church and breakfast?" I inquired, though she didn't catch the tone of frustration in my voice. "We'll skip breakfast and go for lunch instead. How about that Mexican place at the Arboretum?" she suggested. "I'll see you there at noon," I replied, silently challenging her to arrive on time. After bidding farewell to Mikey and me with a kiss, she left the room. Turning to Mikey, I asked, "Well, kiddo, what do you want to do?" He giggled, and we resumed our game. At noon, Mikey and I were seated in the restaurant. I ordered a quesadilla appetizer and a Sprite for him, which he enjoyed immensely. By 12:30, there was still no sign of her. The waitress inquired, "Any word from your companion, or would you like to order?" "No, just the check, please. My little one is getting restless," I replied, sensing the impatience of the crowded restaurant. The waitress sympathetically patted my shoulder, saying, "I understand the challenges of restless kids. I have 3 of my own." As she walked away, my phone rang, but I ignored Alicia's call. Instead, she sent a text. "I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour." "Seriously, Mikey?" I sighed. "What am I going to do with her?" Unsurprisingly, he didn't respond. I typed my reply, "I won't be waiting." I powered down my phone, settled the bill, and prepared Mikey for the journey to the car. It was time for decisive action. I couldn't continue allowing her to deceive me and dominate me. I refused to let her portray me as the fool I once was. Granted, Mikey made a difference, but I was confident I could win custody of him given her unreliable work schedule. A few minutes later, I strolled through my kitchen, dropping my keys onto the table. Setting Mikey down, he dashed off like a wind-up toy towards the family room, where his toys awaited. The house phone rang, but I paid it no heed as I followed him. Mikey adored his playpen, pulling himself up on its netting as he made his way into the family room. "Well, looks like someone's eager to play in their little enclosure, huh? All right, pal." As I settled him in, the phone rang once more. "Mommy won't be pleased, will she?" I teased. He giggled, clutching his see and say toy. "Mikey, someone wise once said, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Mommy keeps making mistakes." All I heard in response was the see and say chiming. "The cow says moo." "Enjoy yourself, buddy," I said, tickling his side and eliciting a cascade of laughter. For some reason, the image of Robert Plant exclaiming, "Does anybody remember laughter?" crossed my mind. I made a mental note to listen to some Led Zeppelin later. I cracked open a beer, settled onto the couch next to my son, and then powered up my cell phone. A slew of voicemails from my wife awaited me, which I promptly deleted without a listen. I was confident she'd reiterate everything once she got home. Dana Collins had sent a couple of urgent texts, but I brushed them off naturally. It took her 30 minutes, and I was onto my second beer by the time she entered the kitchen. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, a departure from the morning. I gestured for her to hold off on the inevitable shouting match. "Mikey's asleep," I informed her, nodding toward the playpen where he was sleeping soundly. "He should be in his crib," she remarked, and I concurred, allowing her to escort him to his room. Meanwhile, I slipped into my car and drove off to the cigar lounge. Yeah, I know. Some might say I was avoiding the confrontation, but to me it felt pointless. My marriage was essentially over. She had prioritized work over our family. As I sat facing away from the door, engrossed in an article about bridges, a voice startled me from behind. "You're not difficult to track down, Boyd." If I were evading detection, Dana, I wouldn't be sitting here. She positioned herself in front of me, settling into one of the leather chairs across a small table. "Have you tried this one?" she inquired, displaying her chosen cigar. It was a commendable selection. "No, but it comes highly recommended." Yeah, that's what Nick mentioned. Nick, the proprietor of the lounge, always had a suggestion ready, particularly for an attractive woman. It seemed to explain how she gained access to the locked private lounge. Dana borrowed my lighter and caught me glancing at her legs. Unusually bare, they still retained their allure. It seemed she had recently applied lotion, as they gleamed with a moist sheen. "You're too predictable, Boyd," she teased, crossing her legs in the opposite direction. I took a slow drag from my cigar and impolitely exhaled the smoke in her direction. "What's on your mind, Dana? I'm trying to unwind here." She briefly frowned, her eyes betraying a hint of sadness before she spoke. "I have some troubling news. This will be tomorrow's front page headline, but I wanted to inform you personally before things go south." She pushed her phone across the table with a smirk as I glanced down her blouse. "What should I be searching for?" "The video's ready, just take a peek." She took a drag from her cigar, then coughed. My laughter halted midway when I played the video on her phone. It showed my wife and David Bridges kissing in an office. I threw the phone onto the table and leaned back. "I'm sorry, Boyd, truly, but there's more." "Why apologize? You've got the scoop of the year, and when did you start caring about collateral damage?" "It's never hit this close to home before," she murmured. I sighed. "Do you know what's the worst part of all this?" She shook her head, and I fought back tears, forcing myself to look away. "That jerk didn't even take a week to seduce her. He's also having affairs with the other 2 women on his legal team." I shrugged and took another drag. As if it matters. I was headed for divorce anyway. This just seals the deal. A smirk crossed Dana's face, then vanished. She seemed to relish the demise of my marriage, probably thinking it positioned her to swoop in and console me. "Send me that video, please." "I can't, Boyd. The story isn't—" "Screw your story," I yelled, slamming my hand on the table. "This is about my damn marriage." I rose, offering a silent apology to the few men in the room. "Fine," she relented without a fight. "Just don't make it public." I scoffed. I walked to my locker, grabbed a bottle of Macallan 25-year-old single malt. If ever there was a time for a drink, it was now. I filled 2 generous glasses and settled back into my seat. Dana helped herself to one without asking, and I relit my cigar. "Thanks," she murmured after a sip. Her attempt to conceal her grimace betrayed her lack of familiarity with Scotch. I honestly never thought she'd betray me like that. I always believed she valued her reputation too much to take such a risk. It's him, you know. He's notorious for chasing after women. We just couldn't gather concrete evidence. No, it's on her. Sleeping with him in his office within a week, she was seeking it out. How did you manage to obtain that video? Well, it's a felony to install a camera like that, so let's just say it wasn't me, okay? Let's call it an anonymous source, and leave it at that. Her grin contradicted her words, but I decided not to pursue the matter. Sure, whatever. I powered on my phone to upload the video to the cloud and received a text from Alicia. "You need to come home so we can talk." I groaned and replied, "No need to talk. We're done. Enjoy your time with Bridges. Tomorrow's headlines will be interesting." I switched off the phone and observed Dana as she took a long drag from the cigar, her head thrown back. There was a certain allure to a woman smoking a cigar. Not as captivating as her legs, but still. "Your wife?" she inquired. I nodded and took a sip of my scotch, remarking, "I wished her luck with handling the press tomorrow. She'll probably assume you leaked the story to me. I'm confident you'll vouch that I wasn't your undisclosed source." "Tomorrow's going to be chaotic for you," she cautioned. "Yeah, I know. No matter what, I'm in trouble, so I'll just stick to my routine, deal with whatever comes my way." "And you're fresh out of bubble gum? Look at you, referencing cheesy 80s movies." She chuckled, saying, "It's a cult classic, man." After another hour of casual conversation, my cigar burned out. If I thought she'd agree, I would have ordered a couple more just to have an excuse to keep stealing glances at her, but it was time to leave. "Take care, Boyd, and I really am sorry," she said sincerely. "You're a good person and don't deserve this." "Yeah, well, it is what it is. Catch you later, I suppose." I decided to check into a hotel. I wasn't ready to face my soon-to-be ex-wife until I absolutely had to, and that would likely be the next day when everything blew up. I woke up at 6 and switched on the news. The chaotic situation had commenced and was being broadcasted on every channel. I brewed a cup of subpar hotel coffee and started the shower. Earlier, I had stopped by the store to grab some clothes and toiletries for my hotel stay. Uncertain of when or if I'd return home, I prepared for a week. The warmth of the water was comforting, despite the weak water pressure, though that was the least of my concerns. After showering, I powered on my phone and disregarded all the texts. I messaged Rose, "No live show for me today. Find a guest host or play a pre-recorded show." She responded, "I saw the news. I'm sorry." The phone rang, and, unsurprisingly, it was Alicia. I ignored it and raised the volume on the television. The anchor announced, "We have breaking news. Following the Times report on David Bridges having an affair with his lawyer, Alicia Taylor, graphic video footage has emerged. Viewer discretion is advised." I viewed the footage of them kissing and him touching her breasts. Fortunately, they ended it there. The co-anchor remarked, "This directly contradicts Governor Bridges' claim that there was no romantic involvement between him and his lawyer. We've attempted to reach Alicia Taylor for comment but haven't received a response." I made up my mind to go through the messages to understand exactly what excuses my wife was making. "What are you referring to?" "I'm not sleeping with David. Stop being unreasonable and come home." However, the messages from the next morning told a different story. "It's not true. We're not having an affair." "Boyd, please call me." "I swear to you it's not true. I love you." It seemed like she must have been watching TV because the following text said, "We only kissed. That's it. And it was a mistake." I shook my head and replied to that message. "I know there's more in that video. You've been caught and we're finished." She repeatedly called, but I silenced the phone and observed pundits discussing Bridges and his alleged affairs. Surprisingly, they focused more on him than on my soon-to-be ex-wife, which was somewhat relieving. I reasoned that the less her name was mentioned, the less mine would be. Upon checking my voicemail, I found numerous messages from Alicia, alongside inquiries from news stations seeking my comments. Fleetingly, I contemplated appearing on one of the shows to provide a statement and end the scrutiny. But I knew better. Ultimately, maintaining silence was in my best interest. Following the typical course of action for betrayed spouses, I divided our assets, terminated joint credit cards, and coordinated with my attorney to update and file legal documents. I pursued full custody, citing her frequent absence from home. My lawyer was confident that I had a good chance of obtaining primary custody in a joint arrangement, especially considering the evidence of the affair, which could potentially circumvent the need for counseling or adherence to timing requirements in the case of irreconcilable differences. I didn't necessarily feel good, but I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing I had finalized the facade of my failing marriage. It was clear that she prioritized her career over me, and it was painfully evident that her love for me wasn't strong enough to prevent her infidelity. Good riddance. Checking the home security feed on my phone, I observed her sitting on the couch, tearfully watching over a sleeping Mikey. I couldn't discern if her tears were for our failed marriage or the turmoil she had created in her esteemed career. I contemplated seeking revenge on Bridges, pondering various methods of public humiliation, or anticipating whatever consequences his wife might impose. Yet none of these actions originated from me. I felt compelled to salvage my pride somehow. Ultimately, I dismissed the idea as foolish. Bridges was heavily guarded, making any attempt futile. Even if I managed to reach him, his security detail would apprehend me, likely resorting to violence. I resigned myself to letting karma take its course. Perhaps he would end up with Alicia. That would serve as a lesson. The following day unfolded much like the previous one, except I had my show to attend to. Rose displayed her usual demeanor, and the atmosphere in the office remained relatively calm, except for the presence of 20 reporters stationed in front of my building. Fortunately, using the entrance from the secure parking garage allowed me to bypass them and reach my office unharmed. Rose mentioned, "Boyd, your friend at the Times mentioned he'll omit your name from the articles if you agree to have Dana on the show again." I threw my arms up in frustration and exclaimed, "Are you serious? What's the point? Having her on the show might even make things worse. I can't have her on without addressing her story." "How were you planning to avoid discussing it anyway? It's the biggest story of the year." "It's my show. I have the right to choose what to discuss." "Sure," she replied, rolling her eyes. "Until the sponsors get upset and accuse you of being spineless." Indeed, she was correct. I'd receive calls from the syndication company and occasionally from sponsors themselves if they were particularly bothered. Such was the nature of radio life. "All right, Dana can join, but make sure she keeps it civil. I have a good memory." "Oh, if she gets the opportunity, she'll be quite pleasant to you, Boyd." She chuckled and walked away. Having Dana on the show was problematic. I couldn't steer the conversation, and her sharp journalistic tongue was beyond my control. She'd prod and maneuver around the topic of my wife until I unwittingly responded to every question I hoped to avoid. An hour later, I slipped on my headphones and observed Dana's smile as she did the same. The only disparity was her crossed legs, which caused her skirt to inch up a bit more, while I, of course, wasn't wearing one. Noticing the legal pad in front of her, I inquired, "Are those questions you've prepared?" She emitted a charming giggle and replied, "Certainly not. I wouldn't dream of appearing on your show with a scripted list of questions." As Rose began the countdown to the start of the show, Dana added, "Besides, I'm more knowledgeable than you now. My interest in you is strictly professional." 3, 2, 1. The intro music began, and I released a deep breath. "Good afternoon, listeners," I greeted. "This is Boyd Baxter, your charming host, and I'm here in the studio with Dana Collins from the Times. How are you doing today, Dana?" "Doing well, thanks for inviting me, Boyd. The pleasure is all mine." "So as usual, Congress seems to be in chaos. Can you shed some light on the latest antics of our elected officials as they struggle to pass a budget?" "The situation remains unchanged. Those advocating for defense prioritize their interests. Conservative factions seek extensive budget cuts, while progressive groups aim to allocate more funds. Meanwhile, moderates seek funding for their respective projects. Consensus is elusive, reminiscent of chaotic traffic in Los Angeles. You know, Dana, as they say, the opposite of pro is con, so it follows that the opposite of progress is Congress." Dana chuckled, inadvertently snorting. "Oh no, I can't believe I snorted on air," she lamented. "Next I'll have you spraying milk from your nose. Why are politicians like diapers? They both require regular changes for the same reason." Dana shook her head. "That was terrible. Let's take some calls. Doug from Springfield is on line 1. What's happening in Doug's world today?" "Hi, Boyd. I'm a big fan of your show. Condolences about your wife." "Thank you, Doug." "Boyd, what can we do to reform our dysfunctional system?" "Something needs to change in that Washington swamp. Implement term limits and conduct audits of politicians' assets before and after their terms due. Perhaps then, without the lure of personal enrichment, genuine progress can be achieved." Dana inquired, "Do you believe that's going to happen, Boyd?" "Nope. No politician from either party will vote for it. Some may claim they support it, but they know it's unlikely to happen because it won't even come up for a vote." She agreed, adding, "It's individuals like David Bridges who believe they can do whatever they want. They think they're untouchable." I winced at the mention of him but didn't interrupt. She went on, "They hunger for power and wealth. They revel in the adulation they receive from their followers who eagerly agree with them and shower them with praise. They campaign on moral high ground and then engage in affairs. It's repulsive." "Tell us how you really feel," I chuckled. "Sorry if I struck a chord," she softened. "It is what it is. My wife is unfaithful. What else can I do except lose money to her and the lawyers?" A fleeting smile crossed her face, quickly fading. "Anyway, on line 6, we have Annie from Long Island. What's on your mind, Annie?" "Oh, Boyd, I adore it when Miss Collins is on your show. You two have such a lovely chemistry." I chuckled. I'm versatile, like a pinch of salt, Annie. I compliment everything. Dana rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile this time. Got a question, Annie? Yes, it's a simple one, but it's for Miss Collins. Do you aspire to be a mother? Dana wore a bewildered expression and threw her arms up in the air. Excellent question, Annie. Politics and my wife are dull. So, Dana, what's the answer? And Annie, you can't see it, but Dana's face is flushed right now. I adore children, Dana replied, deflecting the question like the politician she reported on. Annie chirped. You'd better, because Boyd has that adorable little boy to consider. Okay, I interjected, ending the call. Thanks for calling, Annie. Time to take care of some bills. We'll be right back. Oh my God, Dana exclaimed. Going to be an interesting day, I groaned. Rose flashed us a double thumbs up as if it were fantastic radio. It probably was, but I didn't feel particularly great. 3 hours later, I announced, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Don't go changing. As the on-air sign switched off, I placed my headphones on the desk. Dana neatly hung hers on the hook opposite her. Well, that was unexpected, she remarked. I didn't anticipate being grilled by elderly women today, that's for sure. Hey, those elderly ladies adore me. I'm big with the septuagenarian book club demographic, she chuckled. I'm sure they're your main supporters. Careful now. They also read newspapers. Better scrutinize your comments and letters a bit more closely. Do I want to be a mother? What kind of question was that? I chuckled as I packed my notepads into my bag. It's a legitimate question, and I couldn't help but notice you didn't give an answer. I gave her a skeptical glance, and she frowned. I can't picture myself as a mother. I genuinely adore kids. It's just that, with this job, I can't see how I'd manage to find the time. Suddenly, a wave of sadness washed over her, and she said, Jesus, I'm sorry, I'm becoming all... Don't worry about it, I interjected. I must say, though, kids aren't as daunting as they seem. I'm about to pick mine up from daycare and play with trucks. How can you stay so composed, Boyd? Your marriage is crumbling, yet you're acting like it's just another Tuesday. What would you have me do? I can't curl up into a ball and cry. I have a child, a job. I need to keep everything together so nothing falls apart. I'm putting on a brave face and soldiering on, Dana. What else is there? I don't know. I guess I expected more emotion. I chuckled. Emotions are for the weak. I didn't truly believe that, and she saw right through me. She touched my cheek, her expression turning into a frown. Pardon me, Dana. I have to go to daycare. Thanks for being on the show again. Anytime. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call me. I mean it. Anything. She smiled, and I walked away. Life continued, and a month later I found myself seated in my lawyer's office, awaiting Alicia's words. Boyd, I'm sorry. It was a mistake, and... Alicia, I don't want to hear it. If you believe our divorce is solely due to you sleeping with that man shortly after meeting him, you're mistaken. Please keep it calm, my lawyer intervened as my tone escalated. Listen, your affair, your involvement with him, is a deal-breaker on its own, but you've also reverted to your old patterns from when I first filed for divorce. You were unreliable, deceitful, and ultimately prioritized your career over our marriage and child. That's not acceptable, and you knew it. That's why you didn't discuss taking the job with me. Boyd, it was just supposed to be jury consulting. I've heard your explanation, but it wasn't just that, was it? No, I didn't think so. You got swept up again. It's like an addiction for you. Frankly, with how quickly you engaged with him, I'm certain you've cheated on me before as well. Just sign the papers. I'm being more than reasonable. I want primary custody, she choked out through tears. I chuckled, and my lawyer remarked, Miss Taylor, it's a non-starter for us. There's no scenario where my client relinquishes primary custody, especially considering your demanding work schedule. We strongly believe a judge will deem it best for Michael's well-being. Damn it, Alicia. My investigator says you've been pulling 14-hour shifts all week, and you haven't even bothered to ask to see Mikey since you moved out weeks ago. Who are you trying to fool? I love him, she murmured. I know you do, but it seems like you love your job more. You can see him whenever you want. I'm not going to be unreasonable about it. I do love you, Boyd. Truly. Yeah? Could have fooled me, babe. I left the office only to later discover she had signed the papers. My marriage was over. 6 months later, Alicia had custody of Mikey for the weekend, and I found myself entering the cigar lounge. Hey, Nick, I greeted as I approached the counter. How's it going, Boyd? That box of Monte Cristo No. 2's arrived for you. I stashed it in your locker. Thanks. Is it busy today? Nah, just a few regulars and a new female member who's been here a couple of times. Cool. Catch you later. After punching in my code, I stepped into the VIP lounge. The scent of cedar and lingering cigar smoke filled the air, comforting me. I acknowledged the familiar faces and, not spotting any women, headed to my locker to retrieve my Cuban cigars. Hey, Boyd. Long time no see. I grinned, grabbing an extra cigar. Hi, Dana. Up for trying a Cuban today? Closing my locker, I handed her the contraband. Thanks, she said. I've sort of been keeping tabs on you. You're not doing a very good job, I chuckled as we settled into chairs. I'm not exactly elusive, and you have my phone numbers. She frowned while snipping the end of her cigar. I've been feeling a bit nervous about it. Lighting up with an expensive lighter from her purse, she ignited the aged tobacco with care. I chuckled and exhaled a breath toward the orange halo at the base of my cigar. What's got you all jittery? I inquired. I wanted to invite you to dinner, she confessed. Oh, come on, I chuckled. The woman who'd flirt shamelessly, wearing short skirts, crossing her legs, and dangling her heels to tease me, is nervous about asking me out for dinner. That's hard to believe. She shook her head. This is really nerve-wracking. Thank you. I nodded. Boyd, I haven't dated many people. I was busy. Teasing you was easy. I've never been shy about using my attractiveness to get what I want from men, and sometimes from women. I arched an eyebrow in surprise. I hadn't known she was interested in women. Cut it out, you perv. I'm not into women. Okay, she's a mind reader. Got it. Look, I'm taking a risk here, and I don't want to catch any flack for it. All right. She exhaled a plume of white smoke, asking, What's that mean? Yes, I'll join you for dinner. Really? She asked dumbfoundedly. Seriously? Do you think you're unattractive or something? I teased. No, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not used to dating much. All right, let's finish these and head over to that little Italian place across the street. After dinner, we sat comfortably on my couch with a glass of wine when I inquired, So, do you have time to date me now? Or am I just a fleeting encounter for you? She chuckled. Haven't you heard? I'm no longer with the Times. Oh, I must have missed that, I replied. I'm on TV now. You know the show, you've appeared on it? It's me and a few other ladies on a couch with a couple of guys. Ah, yes, I enjoy that show. It's like candy for those of us who appreciate legs, I remarked. She laughed. I suppose it can be, although I opted for pantsuits twice last week. In that case, I might have changed the channel, I joked. We shared a laugh, and then she teasingly asked, So, you're a fan of my legs? Don't pretend to be innocent. You know I love your legs, I retorted. What about my feet? She asked, turning around and placing her feet on my lap. I shrugged and put my glass of wine on the table. You're wearing jeans and socks today, not your nicest outfit, I teased. I escorted her to my bedroom, where she excused herself and went to the bathroom. I took the opportunity to check if there were any protective equipment in my drawer before getting ready. When I settled down on the bed, the room was dimly lit only by a table lamp. My excitement was palpable, as I was looking forward to the appearance of a beautiful journalist. She and I indulged in a very cool moment that will never leave my memory. It was great. After that, we were lying on the bed, and I decided to gently hint to her that I wanted a relationship, but she apparently did not immediately understand, so I decided to answer directly. I mean, would you like this to become a regular thing? I'm currently accepting applications for a girl, and so far you're the only one I have. She replied, I would love to. Now I have more free time and I'm ready to think about the long term. I'm ready to become a mom. Great, I said. But let's start with you becoming a stepmother, okay? I grinned, and she slapped me lightly on the chest. I'm not cheating, she whispered. Me too, I confirmed, kissing her forehead again. With this one, it seemed to me that I might have found a person for whom family is more important than work. Only time will tell, but half the joy lies in learning the unknown. After all, if we knew what the future held for us, life would be terribly boring.